Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Hawkeye Speaks for episode 3. And where is the consciousness? Is intelligence primary? What is Matt Segall and company missing? Matt Segall, sorry to put you on the spot like this, but Matt Segall is one of the top 100 philosophers in the world today. And what does it mean to be a philosopher and to do philosophy? Well, I think that he is well deserved of this position. I think that he is a brilliant man. I could say young man, but he's only a few years younger than I. So let's say he is a well accomplished scholar indeed. The Whiteheadian, Schelling, okay, as well as he's well researched in general of in general the Western tradition to the least, okay. And my first point of attraction to Matthew David Segall was that I heard him mentioning these problems about neo-Darwinism, and I heard him mentioning Gaia theory. And now here we are, several years later. I haven't seen him actually dig into the science of it, which is what upsets me. Okay, and recently, last summer, Matthew David Segall, in partnership with I don't remember the other people's names, but he organized the Biophilosophy Conference, in which Mrs. Kaufman participated. I don't remember her first name. Levin, a bunch of heavy hitters, just an incredible conference of some of the biggest names in ecology and biophilosophy, truly. And even an individual such as Jack Bagby. Jack Bagby doesn't seem to have a social media presence at all, or a YouTube channel or anything. He's a professor from Washington, if I remember correctly. That was my only exposure to Mr. Bagby, was that biophilosophy presentation on he was proposing some advanced Aristotelianism, but very compelling work, and just the degree of wow, very high caliber. So I mean, that's a good example. Is there something this entire circle of brilliant people is missing? And we can put others on the chopping block here too. Ian McGilchrist, John Vervaeke, Brendan Graham Dempsey's brilliant, okay? Layman Pascal, these very sharp, all right. But what are you guys are talking about nature, and what's missing here? You could take all of the you could take a cross section, let's say. We could compile an imaginary person with the utmost of experience in somatic psychology, in bioenergetics, looking at a person's body posture and understanding the emotional history that they're carrying. That was Lowenfeld's bioenergetics. And there's of course a lot of work in these departments. I mean, there's yoga, goes back 5,000 years, of course, let's say you just imagine polyvagal, okay, someone who is the most accomplished, again, somatic therapist. They know the way they hold their bodies and where memories are stored, and how these facial expressions and every little tiny thing we're doing is showing exactly what we're thinking. Imagine someone who is just the absolute master, okay? That is the baseline that a wild animal operates. And that's the baseline. We could spend our entire lives studying how to be aware and how to be present. And when we study in a mechanistic sense, we'll never fully get there. So that's part of what it is to say that, well, you can never fully know. Well, you can know, but you can't know. You can't have your cake and eat it too, in a way. You got to let go to grow. And you can't hold on to some, presuppositions about the world and then imagine the other ones. Because this is the problem, is that the young brilliant philosophers of today, brilliant, truly talking about amazing things and making all these amazing connections. Andrea Hyatt is another one to put on the chopping block, because I followed her work so closely and read her thesis paper on ecological memory, And I love it. I follow her work closely, like I say, for a reason. But it amazes me. It amazes me that we're still not integrating biophilosophy to the degree of biospheric geophysiology, which would be the science of Gaia theory. And just for a bit of history here, we got Edward Suess, the Swiss or Austrian physicist or geologist, and we had Vernadsky. Okay, these guys invented in the Western lineage the biosphere science, not just the term, but the whole idea that this is a living system. Okay, and then of course, you got Lovelock and Margulis, but you also have William Albrecht, soil scientist, was in the 50s talking about soil health and the climate. You know, at the same time, Barbara McClintock is publishing on jumping genes. So it's not like nothing was happening in biology, okay? People always knew about this stuff, especially it's a huge red flag for anyone right now to ever glorify indigenous wisdom and to not understand that this lineage of honoring, thinking, and reciprocity with the land has always been preserved. Sometimes by white country farm boys, and other times by indigenous native cultures. What's indigenous is the knowledge that is this reciprocal, precipitory deal with the environment. Okay, that's what indigenous is. Indigenous glorified as some past native thing is it's not helpful in a way. It's like hunter-gatherer. Hunter-gatherer is another misnomer in a way because it implies just extracting. People went and they hunted and they gathered, but no indigenous person would do that. That's an alien behavior. The indigenous person would always know how to hunt and how to gather in such a manner as to further their ability to do so tomorrow, next year, next generation. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm pointing to as well, is that you get brilliant people, and how come John Kempf is not at the biophilosophy come from? You know, how come Dan Kittredge is not there? Nicole Masters. How come John Todd is not there? You know, how come? These are the giants of ecology, are the ones that went into regenerative systems, regenerative agriculture, land management. You know, Aldo Leopold, Victor Schauberger, tradition. The hydrological cycle is governed by a very complex dynamical relationship, and it involves the mind. Okay, so it's uber complex, but at the same time it's simple to say that when you're living in a Western mechanistic society, there's a chance that you'll just never get it. You just can't see that we're just plainly living in a living world, that everything that we do, every decision we make and action we take has effects in nature. So whatever happens with the environment and society, it's not the fault of giant political systems and this and that. It is always that too. It's top down and bottom up. But if we don't understand the bottom up aspect, I don't know really what we're talking about. Okay, I honestly really don't know what we're talking about. And let's take a little look outside here. And I wanted to point out, I made a little post this morning saying, hey, my reality is not your reality. Okay, this is what a lot of the world looks like right there. So when I look out my window, this is what I see. And we want to think about that, how, there's this whole conversation about savage, the savages, and native people were savage, and we have to beat back nature because nature is out to get us. And this is the conversation that people are actually ignoring in the whole consciousness conversation. We need to beat back nature, anti-biotic, anti this, anti that, anti-everything and even anti-life legitimately as a whole stance. Okay? And that's a slippery slope. That's a very, very, very slippery slope. Okay? So, nature, there's always truth on both sides of the fence. It is true that nature, when we are emerging out of the wild, and this could still happen today. If you go to a jungle and you have zero human support and you have to figure it out, you have to kind of beat back nature so that you can exist, or else it. So there is a competition aspect, okay? And this is something as well. Competition and cooperation are a very important piece that can help us when we're actually digging into how intelligence in nature plays out, okay? And it's important to dig into these actual dynamics of how things really work instead of jumping around from this neuroscience idea of consciousness to this metaphysical idea, and you've got nothing to really connect it. Well, what connects it is life itself, and its ecology. It's called vitality in organisms, biology, vitality in biology, fecundity in ecology, which means fertility, diversity, resiliency, and then in computation, it's called cool thermodynamics. It's called efficiency. So we have different, but it all is the same thing, which is the storing of is integrated information theory in a way is that complexity gets stored and embodied in systems. Okay, and that is knowledge of how to operate, which takes a choice at all of these, every opportunity. Either the environment is making the decision or an organism can, and the more complex the organism is, the more it has the ability to make choices, and even to get to the point where you can make choices that say that choice doesn't even exist. You can make choices that say that choice doesn't exist and I don't have to choose to do anything and I demand to make my choice the choice. This is the degree to which we have this type of debate, okay? Consciousness in the environment. I want everyone to consider that the absolute most brilliant somatic therapist or somatic psychologist, someone, bioenergeticist, someone who really, really, really knows the body mind, the way that people hold their bodies and what exactly that means. Someone that could read exactly what someone is thinking just by looking at the way that we hold ourselves, the speech patterns, the eyes, all of this stuff. Okay, that's the baseline. That's the baseline for a wild animal. Even little tiny brained ones, fish and birds, and maybe even insects too, and maybe even plants too, are 100% just that aware all the time. We don't fully even have ways to measure this. So this is the whole consciousness term and question absolutely needs to be thrown under the same lens or critique as Levin says about intelligence, which is that you're really just measuring your own consciousness when you're projecting it upon where you think it stops and starts. So how to handle the conversation, this is what I would like to prove. What does consciousness mean? Like how dare answer the question without talking about the implications that health is involved in consciousness. Like, oh, it's just about some old dead philosophers and then my opinion. Again, that's great. And I have a lot of respect for people that study. I'm not trying to be like that. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't study and you shouldn't become a historian of philosophy and you shouldn't be a scholar of someone that you admire. I think that's really cool. But I think doing philosophy, should be something much more. Okay? And what that something is to explain the fundamental principles of nature. Okay, to sit at the head of the table above physics, mathematics, religion, all of it. Okay, philosophy, Sophia, the wisdom seat, That's what's so important. And if philosophy is not ready to rise to the task of putting forward a definition that actually solves the divide between creationism and scientism, these fundamentalist camps. So, how conscious are you? All right, if we use this Levin analysis, the intelligence analogy, how conscious are you if you don't talk about that? If you don't talk about how in much of the world we have a huge divide between materialists and mystics, okay? The general belief that there is a power greater than us, intelligent design, theology, all of that into serious fundamentalist beliefs. And then over here, no intelligent design, matter comes first, consciousness emerges out of that. So, and that's something too to touch on really quickly. Kurt Jaimungus the other day saying that the dominant view is that consciousness emerges from the brain. Well, I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure that the dominant view, actually, if you just go out and talk to people, not published researchers, but people, I think like panpsychism type of view is by far the dominant worldview. But there's no way to prove that in science. Like science, as soon as you commit to the act of reductionist science, which is already committed the act of its own metaphysical axiom that nothing exists and entropy is the law, that everything is boiling down, right? That's not even possible to begin with. It makes science itself a category error, okay? And then to have philosophers today that are incapable of standing up and saying that the first principles in physics do not equal a coherent reality, all right? Where's the courage to deal with these issues? And this is what I'm implying is that some of these big issues, and in my work too, and in my studies of ecology and the larger issues of what is standing in between us and implementing solutions that are already completely available, you find out how big trauma is. Like it ain't no just buzzword to throw around. Our traumatic experiences and then the way that we need to form an ego to protect ourselves, and then cognitive dissonance that because we need to believe, we have to believe in something, and it's hard to let go of that, and we get taught what we got taught, and like how are you going to talk about this other stuff and not talk about that? How would you have a conversation about consciousness and act like the rest of the world doesn't exist too? I mean, I think you can go on to, of course, YouTube and watch the Vedanta lectures and stuff, and you can rarely, basically, within the Western circle, hear an Indian scholar talking about Vedanta, much less someone from the shamanistic tradition, much less, hey, I hope everyone knows that Russia has a hugely rich metaphysical, not just like a like mystic tradition. No, they have an entire science that is much more based on the incorporation of metaphysics. And yeah, okay. I mean, there's a lot more people in the world than the Western tradition, and it's cool. It's great. Again, it's great to study the history of these ideas, but again, I mean, I'm putting forth within the body of my work, and again, I got this from Levin, and then it's just something I cannot get away from that I find within everything is that it's not dualism, it's polarity binary, okay, mind and body, no, not at all. It's all one, yeah. But monism, it's not like it doesn't really serve the purpose of taking things apart to analyze them and see how things are working. Monism most certainly serves the purpose of understanding the whole. Yeah, I'm a monist, man, but okay, but mind and body is not correct. It's wrong. It's mind, body, and environment. It's okay, genotype, phenotype, and algotype, the algorithm. And that's what I was saying I got from Levin, that word, the algorithm, the rhythm that's playing. Mind, body, environment. 3 and 1, 1 and 3, the Trinity situation. And this actually is quite important, okay? and then you could go to four directions, five elements. The thing, I mean, the Greeks had four, but there's four directions, certainly. I mean, there's a lot of ways, as I was saying previously as well. When you get into biological systems, these numerology, you just see this stuff all over the place. My goodness, I mean, the golden ratio emerged for me. I didn't start with that, though I know that this is a big part of Dan Winter's work and other people's. But when I did this hardcore mathematics on the clay problems and all this stuff, the golden ratio found me. I didn't push it. It's just these. But anyway, physics, mathematics, consciousness plays a part in all of this, okay? Because you'll never find the connection between is mind primary, any type of, I mean, I hesitate to even keep saying panpsychist because, of course, it's all of theology is, in a way, intelligence came first. It's a mind primary system. You know what I mean? It's only reductive materialistic science, which I'm pretty sure is like just, you know what I mean? It's like those all the things that say like human history, just a little tiny dot right here. Yeah, I mean that's, and it is very useful for engineering. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. If I'm gonna build some stuff in the shop and build anything mechanical, I use mechanical thinking. Absolutely deterministic. There is no free will when I want to build a machine. But that's where I'm gonna leave that thinking. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at the door of the shop when I go outside to the garden. You know what I'm saying? So to try to answer this question about consciousness without fully accepting the implications that intelligent design is, you can't just be talking about panpsychism again or mind primacy in any way without saying this is what it means, and I'm ready to stand up and reconcile the divide that I see in society between scientism and creationism. I want to help people come together, and not just because it's a freaking woo-woo good idea, but because no, actually that's how it works. And creative evolution is actually how it works. There's no scientific basis for either one. It's both dog shit. Okay, there is no scientific basis for straight up God made everything. Like it just doesn't, again, I mean, and everyone has a flaw here that you have to address. Okay? That's not a scientific idea. Yet the bulk of the people in the world do actually kind of believe it. Okay? And science doesn't want to even just like, you're just going to ignore these people and pretend like they don't exist, and then say, oh, and then it's, you get this very authoritarian belief that says, and those guys are the authoritarians. Like, you guys know how to light a bomb to a society, don't you? So if you want to call yourself a philosopher, you need to step up and provide solutions to issues. If your philosophy doesn't inform people on safe and effective decision making, okay, and if you don't know how to talk about these things in regards to serious issues that are going on in the world today, not just historical philosophy, then that's fine. That's fine. But you're a historian of philosophy. You're a specialist of a niche area of thinking. If you want to really talk about ecological memory, yeah, the land knows that animals, they're watching our every move. Okay? They don't need to play word games about what's going on. You have to understand what creates desertification versus a vital, thriving ecosystem. No, it's not atmospheric climate. It's not just the sun. It's not just the no. I mean, biospheric geophysiology, the real science of the Gaia theory, the integrated relational climate loop dynamics. Check out the paper. Okay, because you go and look at climate science and it's nothing. Okay, this is a good point, hopefully, to wake you up, is that number one, there is no theory of biology. Matt Segall, I even have Matt Segall quoted as saying that. I've heard many people admit this. There is no theory of biology. Again, you see what I'm saying? How do you not have a theory of what life is? And we're going to stand up and say, no, this is pretty important. but we're going to talk about consciousness. So consciousness then is not associated with life, I guess. It's associated with our opinions, our mind stuff. That's called theoretical psychology. Again, what another cool sport to play. But does theoretical psychology end up equaling healthy biology? I hope so. I hope so. The difference is a goal, okay, which is actually a big piece of it, of the part of answering the question about what intelligence is. If you rule out goal directedness, what are the results you get? Okay, and then again, you can start from a materialistic perspective, but you may be, of course, just denying that nature exists, that life exists, and those things could be important, you know. So consciousness. Are we conscious enough to see beyond the binaries to what actually needs to be done? And again, to put Andrea Hyatt on the spot, um, I love the podcast. Great. Okay. Love the work. I mean, the thesis work, ecological memory. What a brilliant scholar. The podcast, Love and Philosophy Beyond Dichotomy. And to not effectively address these huge elephant in the room questions, cows, COVID, climate, barely touching on the liberal and conservative. This was something I just posted about yesterday too, is that it's a shame that liberal and conservative have been co-opted by the red and blue situation. But because it's, wow, oh man, I mean, these are terms that people should understand. And when I say people, I mean we, us, me, all of us, that liberal it's a mindset, it's an ideology. It's an ideology when it becomes an ism and a schism, but it's a way of thinking, a liberal way of thinking versus a conservative way of thinking that are really quite akin to centropy and entropy, yin and yang, the creative forces. And I believe that conservatism, really at that level, is the feminine energy, and liberalism is the masculine energy. And so that's what I mean by it's unfortunate for them to be co-opted in the political sense, where it's certainly not really appropriate to say that liberals, the masculine party, though there are some associations there, okay, about toxic masculinity. Well, that's for another talk. Consciousness, though, what I'm saying is there's real world implications, okay? And you can't answer those real world implications by being associated with any of the ideological camps. Like, obviously, that's not what a philosopher should be doing. You know, um, we shouldn't be. And sometimes I love Professor Segall. This was one of my introductions into philosophy when I really started getting serious and reading the books. I started at the same time watching all of Mr. Segall's lectures from the 90s. Brilliant. Okay, and one of the things that I like about Segall is that he would wear his biases on his sleeve. He would tell you what he thinks, but not in a way that he's like sneaking it into the presentation about the other philosophers' works. No, he would like very thoroughly cover people's works and say and then also kind of say, well, this is what I think. And that's something to really admire, is to be such a brilliant orator, and then also just to make it clear, like, hey, this is what I've learned. And I can leave you with that too, as well. For me, I've been working on developing the centropy. Centropy is the modified second law. Centropy is yin, yin and yang. Okay, and the feminine, yeah. So what I come to find out is that the feminine energy, yin force, needs to, for us to be at a balanced position within the toroid, needs to be at 61.8% of the capacity. Okay, so the yin feminine force rules 61.8%. That's the golden ratio parameter. And then the masculine, the explosive force, gets to have 38.2% of the share. And of course, this fluctuates, and it's about returning to balance. We always want to make liberal and conservative decisions. We want to go out of the house and come back in. We go explode, we go implode. Okay, this is real physics. Is that intelligence is primary, and centropy and entropy. And centropy is the strong force, and entropy is the weak force. Okay, which was just clearly spelled out in the mathematics of it. So I think that covered the bulk of what I wanted to cover. I had made a part three and accidentally deleted it, so that's of no consequences now. But yeah, I just obviously I'm doing these off the cuff for the value of that. We could write these out if you would like to see the papers written out. They are available on the website weavetheground.com and on my Substack, which is Hawkeye Speaks, as well as I got all kinds of papers and articles about all kinds of stuff in both places. Hope you check those out, and I encourage anyone to, and not just encourage. I'm making the challenge, okay, that if you consider yourself a philosopher, or if you are being considered a philosopher right now, that I believe that there is nothing less that needs to be done than rising to the occasion of stepping up and saying what needs to be said. How conscious are we? Thank you.